and we'll answer them as soon as we can. Lastly, we've provided some additional resources for you to supplement your learning. You can access them by clicking on the links in this section. Without further ado, I'll hand over to our speakers.
Hey there! Welcome back to our virtual training day for Dynamics 365 Enterprise Resource Planning apps. We're looking at the fundamentals though. My name is Chelsea Lee and I'm your Microsoft Technical Trainer. And I am so happy that you're here for part 2. In our first session, we covered the basics of Dynamics Finance and Operation apps, and we looked into the supply chain management module. In today's session, we're going to be exploring the 4 other areas inside of Dynamics 365's ERP apps. And that's going to be the finance module, the human resources module, as well as the commerce and project operations modules. And since we have 4 modules and only a short amount of time together, why don't we go ahead and get right to it? Ooh, and before we do that, if you haven't already done so, make sure that you bookmark the learning path out and have that ready to go. The learning path for this class, you can find that at aka.ms/MB920. And it has everything that you need to prepare for the MB920 exam. So between this virtual training day and the learning path, you're gonna be all set for that exam. Anywho, let's go ahead and get started with Module 3 and take a look at the Finance module inside of Dynamics 365. And for this module, I'm going to be explaining some of the basics of finance. And I do want to make a quick note for anyone who maybe doesn't normally work in this field. For the exam, you're just going to need to know what tools can assist you with different jobs or tasks. You won't need to know the nitty-gritty of the finance world. But for those of you who do work in this industry, this is actually going to be a great starting point for some future classes down the road when you look at Dynamics 365 Finance. So inside of Dynamics 365, you might be working with organizations that have multiple companies working as part basically of a larger group to meet a business process or a business goal. And if you are doing business in other parts of the world, you may need different names for each of the companies itself. And that's where we get into legal entities. In finance and operations apps, companies are, the only kind of legal entity that you can actually create. And every legal entity is going to be associated with what we call a company ID. You can also set up a search name, and think of this as like an alternate name that can be used to search for this legal entity itself. So let's say, for example, I have a company called Contoso, and they acquire AdventureWorks cycles. I would then need to add a new legal entity to the Contoso company page. But as you create different company records or different legal entities, you may need to manage different charts of accounts. And this is essentially every single financial general ledger that you have in your organization. The way I want you to think of this is like a breakdown on every single transaction made during a certain time frame. So you can choose to have it based off of your calendar year, your fiscal year, or even a quarter. And the chart of accounts, or the general ledger, has several different components. And while for this class, you don't need to have a finance or accounting degree, but I do want to make sure that we kind of talk through some of the tools, so that way if we have anyone who is unfamiliar, it kind of helps you out. So each and every legal entity in your organization is going to have one ledger. And each ledger you can actually link to one of the different chart of accounts. Now, multiple ledgers can be linked to the same chart of accounts, which allows you to share the same chart of account with more than one legal entity. And all the accounting entries that are made to the general ledger, they have to be balanced for the values of the financial dimension, which is really kind of referred to as the balancing of the financial dimension. So if we have an accounting entry that does not balance at the level of the financial dimension value, we need to then create additional accounting entries, and those can be done automatically to balance out that accounting entry. You're also going to have journals, and these can either be manually generated or they can be auto-generated. So let's say if we had a monthly recurring insurance expense, we could set up a review process to approve the expense, and then we basically determine what lines for that expense that need to be posted. And with manual, they're not going to be automatically posted, so you'll have to go through and actually select post. Now, with the system of generated journal entries, we have things like the subledger of all of the accounts payable or accounts receivable, and you can choose to have those auto-posted if you'd like. But it doesn't matter what type of transactions that you're tracking, whether it's an invoice, a sales, vendor payments. You can absolutely choose to add additional details or have default descriptions posted with them. We also have financial dimension sets, which allows you to create a combination of the main account and financial dimensions, and then you can order them for analyzing balances on the trial balance list page and all sorts of other various reports. Now, when you create your first financial dimension set, you're gonna have to select create balances before it can be selected for analysis. But once you have the balances created, you can use them for various reports and basically any of the inquiry screens in there. And once those balances are created, you can also update the balances, which are then going to update any records that have not been added to the balances yet, and then it'll automatically update it for you. And this is what we call a net new update. Or, if you wanted, you can rebuild the balance, which will completely clear the balance and new records, and basically recreate the balance from the beginning of time. Okay, so another key area or tool inside of Dynamics 365 Finance Operation Apps is going to be how to handle taxes. And there are only two things guaranteed in this life: death and taxes. And there are a couple of different ways that you can handle taxes inside of the finance apps. First, you have the sales tax groups. Sales tax groups are groups of sales tax codes that are attached to either your customers or your vendors. And this is going to include all sales tax codes that apply when you trade goods or services with your customers or vendors. Since the type of item that you are selling usually determines the type of taxes, you're going to need a way to calculate them for each item. So that's why we have something called item sales tax groups. And think of these as groups of sales tax codes that are attached to the resource, like a product. And when you set it up, the item sales tax group includes the sales tax codes that apply when you're selling the item. But since the item sales tax group might also include most of the sales tax codes in the system, you do have the option to create the item sales tax groups, and you can either then choose to attach them to a group of items or a single item. Now, sales tax groups are related to the party of the transaction. Think like the customer or the vendor. Whereas the item sales tax groups are related to the resources of the transaction, like the item or the procurement category. Tax groups are going to have a list of tax codes, and the tax codes are both in the sales tax group and the items tax group for that transaction. And basically, it's going to have all the tax codes that are applying to that transaction itself. But don't worry, this is not a tax accounting class, thank goodness. But I do want to go ahead and log into the system for a minute, and I want to go back to when we talked about financial dimensions and show you how to create one. Because I don't know if you noticed, it's a pretty heavy topic, and the good news is it's not that complicated to actually execute it inside of Dynamics. All right, so if you remember from part 1, I am using a lab environment that is available to you, and you can find this at aka.ms/mb920. where if we're in our finance module right now, so each of the modules in the learning path are going to have different lab environments that you could log in and play with these yourself. So again, that's aka.ms/mb920. But let's go ahead and create our financial dimension. We are using a fictional company for this. So I'm going to come over here to our left-hand side, select the navigation bar, and I'm going to come down and we are going to go to our general ledger module. Then inside of our general ledger, we are going to come to our chart of accounts. And then our financial dimensions. Right. So what I want to do is I want to create a new dimension. And if you remember in part 1, it's real simple. At the top of the navigation bar, select New. And now what we can do is we want to use our dimensions from, we're actually going to create a custom dimension. Now you could absolutely use ones from existing dimensions you have, but let's just call this, let's do one for our affiliate revenue. All right, then from the report column name, we'll just do it for an abbreviation for affiliate. And then everything looks good. That's all we'll have to do for now, and we'll just select activate. Now, notice that this will not run until our dimension activation run happens. Again, that's going to take a couple of minutes, and it's something that we can either do manually or have it ran automatically. So notice it's still going to be inactive until that financial dimension runs. But since my affiliate revenue dimension is set up, I could then go through and make any other changes. As far as this class goes, remember, we're not in a finance class, so we are not going to be setting all that up. But I just wanted to show you it's just a click of buttons to create that financial dimension. Okay, so we've covered how you can use the chart of accounts to provide a digestible breakdown of all of the financial transactions that your company conducted or had during a specific accounting period. But now what I want to do is take a look at the periodic financial process. Now, each organization has a different process and different steps that they need to do at the end of a period. And you can actually see some of the different steps that an organization might need to take on the screen. But inside of Dynamics 365, the financial period close workspace allows you to track all of your different financial closing processes across the different companies, the different areas, and the people's responsibilities. And depending on your view of the financial period close workspace, you can either see all the tasks and all the statuses for a specific closing schedule or just the tasks that are assigned to you. So if you actually look here on the screenshot that I have pulled up on the screen here for you, you can see what we call all of the different summary titles. And these are going to help you keep track of everything that you and your team need to complete in order to close out that period. You're also going to have tasks and the status of each section. And this is where you can see, kind of just the status and a timeline of the overall closing schedule. And you can choose to filter either by company or the person who's responsible for that task. And you can also view that when we filter those statuses, you can choose to see something that's due today or, things that are past due. And it's real simple. All you have to do is select that filter at the top of the card list. And you can also select the company filter to view the status for a specific company, especially if you have multiple. And each of these status tabs, they're going to give you a breakdown either by percentage or however you set it up. But essentially, it allows you to see what's been completed and how many tasks you still have remaining. And keep in mind, since this is fully customizable, you can base it off of your own organization's closing process. So that's the closing process, but let's actually take a look at some of the daily or monthly tasks that your accounts receivable team is going to be responsible for. So accounts receivable is basically money owed by a business to its customer, and it's shown as an asset on the company's balance sheet. So for example, let's say I'm an electric company and I bill my customers for electricity after the customer's already received it. And so they're going to get an invoice, and basically it's going to be a record on my accounts receivable until the customer pays it. So if you see here on the graphic on the screen, the accounts receivable team, or the AR team, has 5 main jobs. They first need to process any customer prepayments. So think of this as like deposits. And then after the prepayments, they're going to have to send an invoice to the customer for any remaining balances. Once the customer pays, they're going to enter that they received the payments into the system, and then they're settling all of the different invoices and payments made. Then, if it's all paid off, they'll close out the line. However, if there's like balances due or even past due, they're going to work to collect that payment from the customer. On the other side of the table, though, we have accounts payable, or our AP team. Accounts payable is money that's owed by a business to a supplier, and it's going to be shown as a liability on the company's balance sheet or as short-term debt. So, for example, I'm a restaurant and I get a shipment of food, and I'm getting that shipment before the food has been paid for. This is then shown as a debt as part of a trade payables. So, if we actually look at this process right here, or how we pay a vendor invoice, when a company orders from a vendor, there's usually some sort of purchase order request. Now, this process is going to vary from organization to organization, and it's really going to be based on your own policies. But what your accounts payable team is going to do is that they're the ones who are actually paying for the goods themselves. Remember, these can either be products or services. But what they'll do is they're going to take the invoices that they received from the vendor and they're entering it into the system. And there's a few different ways you can do it. You can use the vendor invoice register, for example, and it's going to let your team quickly enter invoices that don't reference a purchase order, so that way you can accrue all those expenses. Or, if you wanted to use the vendor invoice approval journal, you can select all the invoices and post them to the vendor balance, and you can then reverse that accrual. But essentially, once that invoice is in the system and approved, your team can then issue payment and they're closing out that line. Now, in a minute, I'm actually going to show you how you can create a vendor payment journal entry in the system. But when you are paying for a product or a service that you ordered from a vendor, you're going to need to receive and enter those invoices or generate and submit vendor payments. And then, your AP team is managing all those vendor settlements. Organizations can choose to issue prepayments, which are basically just those advanced payments to our vendors for those goods or services before they're actually fulfilled or delivered. And you absolutely could choose to use a prepayment invoicing or prepayment journal vouchers. And what we find to help minimize risk, you can track those prepayments by defining the prepayment on the purchase order. But once it's time to settle the invoice or pay it off, you can either choose to do it as a partial payment or a full payment, and this is all going to be based on the terms of your contract with your vendor. And this might be a little bit difficult to understand if you aren't familiar with the process. So what I want to do is I actually want to log back into the dynamic system, and we'll create a payment journal together. So it's super important to make sure that you're paying your bills, and you want to make sure that your accounts payable team is all set up to pay out your vendors. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new vendor payment journal. And in order to do that, we'll come to our accounts payable module. Then we are going to come under here to payments. And the very first one is our vendor payment journal. And guess what we're going to do now? We're going to create a new payment journal. How do we do that? Coming up here to that new taskbar. So I'm going to select new. And you can see right away, we just added a line on our journal right here. So what we can do for the name box, I'm just going to name this our Ven Pay, because that's the structure we have for our organization. And the description's automatically going to populate. Then on top of the lines right here, what I have is I am going to select payment proposal. All right, so now I need to put in my invoice criteria. So I want to make sure that I am paying it by due date. Now, for the to and from date, you could also add in additional filters if you wanted. I'm going to just leave those blanks for today. And then if we wanted to look at any records that I wanted to conclude, like any vendor accounts or reference numbers or like the way I'm paying, I could then choose to filter on how this payment batch is going to go. But I'm not going to change that. I'm going to just click OK. And I'm going to just say I want to process all of my vendor invoice statements that currently are due. And here we go. This is pulling up all of my invoices that I'm currently due to pay. You can see that what I currently owe. And so what I can do, all I have to do is click Create Payments. And so now what I can do is I can actually select all of my vendors. And then, so these are all of the different invoices that I want to pay. But let's say, for example, you know what, I don't want to pay everything right now. I just want to pay, let's just pay these first three. So I'm going to just select threes. And then I'm going to, all right, so we have all of our payments here. And let's say that I just need to pay all of them. So to select all, going to go ahead and go to my payment option. And then this is where if I wanted to say, you know, how do I want to pay? You know, if I had any, you know, I have my electronic payment. And this is where I can include any payment IDs. And then I can actually then click post, and all of the invoices that are due to be paid are going to be paid, and you can see what it's going to cost me and then ultimately what's going to be posted inside of the journal. So that's how we pay our bills to our vendors. But what happens if one of our customers need to pay us? Or what if they're late on their payment? Depending on the setup of your organization or the agreement that you have with your customers, you may need to have your accounts receivable team manage the credit and collections portion. Or who knows, if you're a larger organization, you may have a completely separate collections department for this. Either way, let's go ahead and take a look at credit management. And this is actually a tool inside of Dynamics 365 Finance that allows you to set credit limits for customers. And this can either be like a long-term limit, but if needed, you can even set temporary credit limits to kind of help with different timeframes where the customer might be at a higher risk. These are all going to be great tools inside of Dynamics 365. And another one that comes to mind is the risk score. And the risk score is a great place to store key pieces of credit-related information or data about the customer. But the risk score is also what you can use to auto-generate credit limits. And even though the risk scores are not required, they can come in handy, especially when you have a lot of customer records. Because at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're getting paid for your products and services and your customers are up to date on their accounts. However, you know, there are times where a customer may fail to pay, maybe they're late on their payments or something happens. So to help with that, Microsoft Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations offers a really robust credit and collections management tool that allows your team to manage the entire collection management gamut, right from generating the customer account statements, from being informed of balances and when they're due, and they're getting the notifications on when collection letters should be sent to the customers. And it also can help you know when you just need to write off bad debt. And what's more, you can see the customer's calculated aged balances at any given point in time. And this can be setting up where if you want to automatically apply overdue payment charges to any past due balances, or it can actually just help anyone working on those collection activities and free up some of the resources used by site collections because you don't need them anymore. And it's really important that you have a proper collection management protocol because this will help you get your receivables collected on time. And this can help your organization manage cash flows, reduce time costs, and all the efforts that go into having to manually manage all that collections process. But, okay, so I'm looking here where we're at. All right, so we have just a few more sections to cover in this module, and I want to move on to how you can use Dynamics 365 to manage your organization's bank accounts. And it's an important part of running a company. You need to understand what your expenses are and how you can plan ahead. So in Dynamics, we have the Cash and Bank Management module. And the Cash and Bank Management module is really closely connected to the Accounts Receivable and Accounts Payable modules. And you can use the Cash and Bank Management to maintain the legal entity's bank accounts and all of the financial instruments that are associated with those bank accounts. And there are going to be 4 main processes under the Cash and Bank Management. First, you have depositing bank funds. This could include things like deposit slips, bills of exchange, promissory notes, or checks, really anything. Then you have your reconciliation of accounts. And this is where you receive a bank statement, and then you have to review each legal entity's bank transactions with the transaction of the bank statement and make sure that they match up. Third, we might have cases where you want to transfer an amount of money from one bank account into another, or maybe you need to manage letters of guarantee. This is where you have an agreement made by a bank called the guarantor, and essentially you're agreeing to pay a set amount of money to another person who's called the beneficiary. And if the bank's customer, which we call the principal, if they default on a payment or an obligation to the beneficiary, you're still safe. Now, if that happens, you may need to process a settlement. And a settlement can occur between any transaction type that affects the vendor balance or the customer balance. And these things can be like transactions like invoices, payments, credit memos, and fees. Really, any transaction that can be settled against any other transaction type. Now, that's just the management of your bank accounts. But what about how you manage your company expenses? Well, inside of Dynamics 365 Finance, you can use the expense management to create a workflow where you can store payment method information, or you can import your credit card transactions. And then you can track the money that employees are spending and when they're incurring any expenses for your company. And if you wanted to, you could define expense policies and automate the reimbursement of things like travel expenses. And one of my absolute favorite things is that the expense report entry has been redesigned to really simplify the whole expense report process, and it makes it simpler. Now, there is another instance. Let's say, for example, you have a worker who is employed by one legal entity, and they're still part of your organization, but they're doing work for another legal entity under the same umbrella. Now, there's something called the intercompany expenses that basically you can assign that employee's expenses to the legal entity for the correct balance. So no matter what type of expense that you might have to process, the expense management dashboard makes it nice and easy to really kind of walk you through that entire process. Okay. I do want to move on to the asset management tools inside of Dynamics 365 Finance. But before I can do that, I need to make sure you understand the difference between a fixed asset and a current asset. In accounting, we hear the term asset, which is basically an item or a resource that's owned by an organization, and it's supposed to provide some type of monetary benefit in the future, like things like cash flow. Fixed assets are owned by the company with the goal of a productive use by the company rather than resale. So we are expecting them to provide some sort of economic benefit for more than one accounting year, and it's kind of designed to help the business operations. Now, if you were to look at a balance sheet, the fixed assets are reported at their net book value, which is what the purchase price was, minus any type of depreciation or amortization. Think of fixed assets like land, buildings, machinery, computers, furniture, any copyright patents, software, and so on. But there's current assets, which are things like, the items that you're trying to sell or trying to consume within 1 year. And so this is usually within the company's normal operating cycle. So these are things that are acquired for the purpose of being traded. So these are things like investments, inventory, short-term loans, cash, or really anything that's a cash equivalent. So inside of Dynamics 365, you're going to have what we call the fixed asset management workspace. This workspace shows all the information that's related to the fixed assets that are entered into the system. And you'll have a summary view and an analytics view. And it's kind of similar to all the other workspaces that we looked at for the closing tasks, with the tabs like the My Work, My Summary, all of the details in those tiles. And with all of this information, you're going to be able to see about any of the assets related to the company you're currently filtered under. And what's cool, because remember, we are connected to the Power Platform, you can add analytics from Power BI, and you can have that analytics section directly connect to that Power BI workspace. And this is our final section of Module 3, the budgeting capabilities inside of Dynamics 365 Finance. Now, when it comes to budgeting, it's a pretty complex topic. There are a number of different methodologies out there that Dynamics can support. For example, when we look at different budgeting methods, you could take a zero-based budget approach. And this is actually, I would say, probably one of the most common approaches. Zero-based budgeting starts with the assumption that all department budgets are at zero and must be rebuilt from scratch. And so your managers must be able to justify every single expense. So nothing's going to be automatically okayed. Zero-based budgeting is very tight, and the goal here is to avoid any and all expenditures that are not considered absolutely essential to your company's success. This is kind of like that bottom-up budgeting, and it can be a very highly effective way, if you want to shake things up. Or, if you wanted, you could take a historical budget approach. Sometimes you might hear this referred to as incremental budgets. And this is where you're taking the actual figures from like a time period, and then you're either adding or subtracting a percentage to get this year's budget or whatever current year's budget you're working on. And it is, it's another really common method of budgeting because it's pretty simple and it's easy to understand. Incremental budgeting, this is something that you're going to want to use if, there aren't any major cost changes from year to year. But it doesn't matter what you use to create your budget. Dynamics 365 Finance's budget module can help you out. You can use things like basic budgeting to define the financial dimensions for the budgets. You can create budget models, and you can set up and use budget register entries. You can also set up optional budgeting workflows to automate the review of the budget register entries, including things like the budget transfer. So let's say, for example, if an approval is required for transferring a budget amount from one department to another, the workflow functionality can help you automatically create an approval workflow. And you can also set up budget control that can help manage some of those different financial resources through the chart of accounts, the workflows, the user groups, and all of the different source documents and journals. And after you have everything set up, you can plan, measure, manage, and forecast all of your financial resources throughout the rest of the fiscal year. But like I said, budgeting is an incredibly complex topic, and I am not teaching a budgeting bootcamp because that's not really my area of expertise. However, as we wrap up Module 3, I want to remind you that Dynamics 365 Finance is going to provide capabilities for cash and bank management, expense management, fixed asset management, and budgeting. And while you do not need to know how to complete each of these processes, you do need to be aware of the tools available inside of Dynamics 365 that can help support the process. But we have been going for a bit now. So since this is a pretty heavy topic, why don't we go ahead and take a quick stretch break before we shift gears to Dynamics 365 Commerce's module? Sound good? Okay, so I'll see you back here soon. welcome back from break. Okay, so I know we started off today with a super heavy module. And I'll be honest with you, I am not a finance person. So that's not really a module I spend a lot of time working with inside of Dynamics 365. And I think this is a good time to point out that this is a fundamentals course. We're going to just be introducing all the different ERP modules inside of Dynamics. Typically, you wouldn't have a single person who's an expert in all of these areas. More than likely, you're going to stick with one that aligns with your department. But since this is a fundamentals course, we're just kind of doing a mini introduction to each one. But let's go ahead and we're going to just keep the ball right on rolling, and we're going to go right into Module 4, which covers the commerce tools inside of Dynamics 365. So before we get started with all of the cool features and tools inside of Dynamics, I think it's a really good idea that we understand the modern customer. Think about it. When you're making a purchase, are you doing research? Are you comparing prices and reviews to other products? I know I am. And likely your customers are doing the same thing. So as you go about creating the customer experience, or what we call the customer journey, you need to understand that customers want to feel like they are in control from start to finish. And from where they shop and how they pay, and how they're being rewarded to brand loyalty, that's all going to be part of the customer journey. And Dynamics 365 Commerce is delivering a complete omni-channel solution that unifies the back office, in-store, call center, and all of the different digital experiences as one. And this allows you to create a personalized customer journey that's going to deliver better outcomes, and it's going to increase your revenue. So the first step is to create a unified shopping experience. We have moved well beyond the traditional brick and mortar stores. And while they still exist, you're probably going to need to offer some type of online shopping, or maybe you have call centers. So let's say, for example, you want to offer like a shop and pay online, and then you get to pick up in stores. Or you know what? You could even have them, like your customers in your store, they order online, and then it's delivered to their home. And no matter what channel you choose, they may have their own payment methods, their own delivery methods, their different price groups, income, expenses, basically everything in all these different areas, and you need a way to unify them. But that's where Dynamics 365 Commerce comes in. And it's that it gives you an all-in-one solution for your merchandising problems, your inventory, and your channel management. And it's going to give your customers an experience across all of the different touch points, and it can actually help you scale and meet the needs across both traditional and non-traditional retail channels. So I want to show you how simple it is to do. Let's say, for example, I have a store in Boston, and they have a new product coming in. Now, I have a ton of older products still sitting in the back room. And each of these channels, they can have their own payment methods, their own delivery methods, their own price groups, their own income and expense accounts, their own point of sale systems, and it's a lot. But where Dynamics 365 Commerce comes in is that it gives you an all-in-one solution for merchandising, inventory, and channel management. It's also going to give your customers an experience across all the different touch points. And it can scale to meet your needs across traditional and non-traditional retail channels. Now, I want to show you how easy this can be. So let's say, for example, I have a store in Boston and we're getting new products that are coming in. But I still have a ton of older products sitting in the back room. If I wanted to, I could set up a discount for the older product to help move it off the shelves in order to make room for the new product. But in this case, I only want that discount to apply to the store in Boston. I don't want it to interact with any of my other locations, and it's real simple to do inside of Dynamics. So let me actually log in. I'm going to show you how you can create a discount on a single product in a single location. So in order to manage our discounts, we're still going to be working in the finance and operation apps. But for the module, what we're going to do is we are going to use workspaces instead, which is different than what we've done up to this point. So in our workspaces, we want to actually come down and go to pricing and discount management. And this is actually going to show all of our active discounts that we have. But we don't have any set up at this moment, so why don't we go ahead and set up one for our Boston store. So from the discount, we have our menu right here. We're going to select new, and we're going to create a new discount. All right, so from our new discount page, we get to name it. So I'm going to name it our New Year, and I'll just say it's for our 20%. All right, the status is currently disabled, and this is the only time that you can make edits to a discount. You cannot make edits to a discount or any changes while it's in the active status. Then coming down here to our concurrency mode, this is a couple of different things that you need to keep in mind when you're choosing this. When you have multiple compounded discounts, that highest discount is always going to be calculated first. Then the second discount will be taken based off of that remaining amount. So let's say, for example, I'm buying an item for $100 and I'm offering a 40% and a 20% off. Well, I would first take the 40% off the $100, which then leaves me a remaining balance of $60. And then the additional 20% would come off, meaning that I would pay a total of $48. I don't know about you, but I used to always get that confused when I would hear like a 40 plus an additional 20. I think it'd be 60%. It's really not. It's actually like a 52% discount. Anyways, I'm going to select best price. And then on the discount count, this is going to let me see all of the different options. I am going to put it from discount. There we go. To let me know what account to pull it from. All right. And everything looks good. And then we're going to come down here to our other details. And this is where I can put in a description for this discount is. So I'm going to just say New Year discount offering 20% off. All right, so that looks good. Let's come down to our price and discount. And for the discount percentage, I'm going to put in 20. And you could also put in a quantity limit here. So if you have like a super killer discount or something like that, and you don't want someone to like completely empty out your inventory, then you can put a quantity limit here. All right, and then the validation period. We're going to keep it as a standard, but then this is where I can set the effective date. So, maybe this is our New Year sale. So I am going to maybe put this, it starts on 1/1/24 and it expires, let's say 1/31/24. All right, so that looks good, validation. And then let's come down here to our lines. And I'm going to add the products that qualify for this discount. So I'm going to add Right, so we have the ad, and I'm going to change the category to our fashion. I can just type that in, or you can use this filter. All right, so I'm going to select fashion. And that's going to apply the sale to everything in the fashion category. Now, if I actually go down here to my line details, and I can then just add a little bit more of a description. So I can say like, it's all products in the fashion category will be included in the discount. There we go. All right, so that looks good. I'm going to scroll all the way up here to the top, and then we're going to select our price groups. Now, in this case, for our price groups, so for this case, our price groups, remember, we are just applying this to our Boston stores because they're the ones with the excess inventory. We don't want this for our entire organization. So I'm going to type in Boston for this one. All right, so for our price group, I am going to apply this to my retail accounts, which includes my Boston accounts. And then that looks good. I think everything's here, so I'm going to hit save. And once that's saved, I can go ahead and close out. And now I have my New Year discount, and I can actually change it to enabled. And once I click save, once we hit the January 1st, that discount will automatically be applied to all of the stores in Boston under that price list. So you see, it's easy enough to manage the products that are in your store. But what about the fulfillment process? What happens when you have a customer-centric approach to shopping? How are you making sure that your customers' orders are arriving on time? Well, that's where you can leverage something called a distributed order management system, or a DOM system, DOM, depends on how you want to say it. The DOM system inside of Dynamics 365 can help optimize fulfillment so that your orders are arriving to the customers on time, but it's costing you the least amount of money. And the way that it works is that it's orchestrating this process and it's helping improve your overall supply chain. And it does this by automating several different functions like order routing. It can help with order splitting, shipping, inventory forecasting, reordering, and really the entire inventory management process. And this is important because if your customers want to buy a product from a variety of different channels, or they're bouncing back and forth between platforms, or even ordering directly online from a store and having it fulfilled at their house, they want to be able to pick a way that suits them best. And a distributed order management system is going to be designed in a way that meets the demand for the products, and it's coming from this huge industry shift that we're seeing. Omni-channel retail is really complex. And by using a distributed order management system, it unifies your business in basically this new age of commerce we're seeing. So as we kind of move along and we look at some of the different capabilities inside of Dynamics 365 Commerce, we need to look at assortments. What assortments allow you to do is basically manage product availability across all your different channels. And this is what's going to determine which products are available at specific stores or during a specific period. In the Commerce app, an assortment is a mapping of one or more channel to one or more products. So this means that the overall product mix of the channel is going to be determined by the published assortments that are assigned to that specific channel. Now, I do want to point out here that you absolutely can configure multiple active assortments per a single channel. Now, on the product side, you can include a group of products by using a product category hierarchy. And you can configure the assortments by including one or more category hierarchy nodes. Then what will happen is the assortments will include all the products that are in that category node and all of the child nodes. So if you wanted, you could use the exclude option and you could set up specific products or categories that are either excluded or included in your assortments. So if you create an assortment, let's say at the global level, you can even have channels from multiple legal entities. And this is really helpful if you have products and product categories that are included in assortments across multiple legal entities. Cuts down on a lot of that repetitive work. But let's actually go ahead and create an assortment of a bunch of related products in the system, and we'll do it for a specific channel, and let's do it so it's going to be for, let's say, our spring launch, so it's not available right away. So we are pretty excited for our spring launch, but we want to make sure that all the products are ready to go. So to do that, we are actually going to come in to our navigation page. And instead of our workspaces here, because we were in workspaces last, we're actually going to come down to our modules. We're going to scroll down and we're going to come to our retail commerce. Then under catalogs and assortments, we are going to select our assortments. All right, so here are all of our different assortments that we already have ready to go, but we are creating one for our new spring season. So let's select new. And we have our assortment name. We'll name it our new spring season. And then we need to add our effective date. So when are these products available? Well, let's just have them at start the first of the new year. All right, so those will start on January 1st, and this expiration is never. So this isn't a limited edition product where it's only available for a certain point in time, but it is not available until January 1st. All right, so I'm gonna come down here to my commerce channels. And I am going to add a new line for our organization. And I am going to select, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to do retail stores by type with Fabricam. And then I am going to actually add all of my retail stores. So I'm going to select all, and I'm going to move them all over. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually select the entire Contoso retail hierarchy. So when I scooch that over here and select it to add, it's going to add everything that falls under that hierarchy right there. But of course, if you wanted to select specific ones, you could. Let's say, for example, I can add just my mall. So if I didn't want to add everyone, I could just have it impact my mall ones. So let's actually just apply our spring new season. This is only going to affect our malls, Atlanta, Houston, San Francisco, and San Jose. It won't come into our online store or our call center. I'm going to click OK. And now I can see that that has been added. All right, so I'm going to now scroll down, select my products, and I'm going to select Add Line. Pick the category of the products that we are including in this launch. It's going to be for our baseball line. So I'm going to select baseball. And so right now, you see this line type right here. It's including everything in that baseball category. But let's say, for example, I wanted to exclude everything from our adult baseball line. So I can actually come in here and say I'm excluding my adult baseball infield products. And then if I wanted to add or remove anything else that might be included inside of this new launch, I can go ahead and click Save. And then once it's saved, I can actually publish this. And it'll say, are you sure you want to publish it? Yes, I am. And now, when our new season starts on the 1st of January, all of our retail stores will automatically get this new product launch. Alrighty, we have just a few more topics that we want to cover here in Module 4. And honestly, that's the nice thing about this session. We hit you with the hard stuff early on when you're awake, and then we kind of get to cruise through the last few modules. Anywho, let's go ahead and talk about our customers for a moment. We want to keep our customers happy. We want them to order the way they want, but we also want them to feel valued. And one of the ways you can do that is through a customer loyalty program. And lucky for us, Commerce offers a simple loyalty program that can be used across all your legal entities and all your commerce channels. So whether it's a point system or maybe you're linking it to other system programs, you can easily set up one for your customers. And this can actually help your staff build a trusted relationship with your customers. So they know things like their shopping preferences, or they can make different recommendations for them. And that actually leads me right into our next tool inside of Dynamics 365 for Commerce, is the Dynamics 365 Customer Insights. The way that this works is Dynamics 365 Customer Insights, it's collecting and combining data about your customers from all sorts of different systems, including some of our non-Dynamics 365 applications. Basically, anywhere they interact with your brand, that data is all going to be aggregated into a single view of your customers, all in real time, so you have real-time insights about your customers. Pretty cool, right? So this is a great way for your team to know what their customers want, their birthdays, and it links well with the customer loyalty. But last section kind of that I want to talk about is fraud and the tools inside of Dynamics 365 that are designed to protect both you and your customers. And here at Microsoft, we have years of experience protecting our own e-commerce business from fraud. And as a result, we've developed a pretty sophisticated technology stack that uses connected big data from across all our different lines of business. We then created an artificial intelligence, or AI, to help correct decisions in real time on whether there is a legitimate transaction or if it's potentially a fraudulent one. And when it comes to fraud and abuse, since we're pretty much living in a digital world, it can come in so many different forms. Maybe you have someone trying to force your way into an account with what we call a brute force attack. Or, while that may be kind of an old way of, fraud, in today's digital world, we're finding that fraudsters are using way more sophisticated technology. So they're doing things like phishing emails, and basically this is a deceptive email message or a copycat URL address. And what it's trying to do is trick your users into giving out personal or confidential information. And no matter what type of attack you might be experiencing, it can lead to some type of loss, whether it's financial or non-financial, like customer trust. And so Microsoft Dynamics 365 fraud protection is giving your organization the capability to assess whether attempts, that are created or people trying to get into the account, making sure whether they are fraudulent or actual logins. And these risk assessments inside of fraud protection can be used by the customer to block or challenge suspicious attempts to create those new or fake accounts. And it can actually help reduce any compromised accounts. Now, while it is slightly annoying that, every time you log in, you may have to verify yourself, honestly, the way that I look at it, it is way better than losing out on money or having your account information potentially attacked and then used in other fraudulent areas. But remember how I said that we use AI to detect fraud? Well, it's doing so much more than that. The AI technology is continuously learning and adapting to evolving fraud patterns. And this adaptive AI is used to analyze historical data. It's identifying patterns of all the anomalies, and it's looking to help recognize them. And so this makes it so if your store managers or if you have a fraud department, they can use these reports to look for trends of let's say things like fraudulent returns or fraudulent accounts. And at the end of the day, our goal here is to help you protect your inventory, your bottom line, and your customer reputation. But that actually wraps us up for Module 4 on Dynamics 365 Commerce. I know that this has been shorter than our earlier module, but we really only scratched the surface on the capabilities inside of Dynamics. So if you did want to check out that sandbox environment or try out some of these tools for yourself, be sure to bookmark that learning path at aka.ms/MB920. But we have 2 short modules left in our session today, and when we get back, we'll close out the day with human resources and project operation modules inside of Dynamics 365. So I'll see you back here in 10.